Okay, folks, it's Monday again, and we are live. All right, got some new toys today. Going to be doing some experimenting with some new sounds. So bear with me while I have a little bit of fun. And I'm going to, as usual, give everybody a moment or two to catch up with us and log on. So I have some people online there. Oh, good. We already got 9 people. That's excellent. And one of them is Chuck. That's good. So as always, if you would let yourself be known by checking in or liking or commenting, and if you'd like to share this broadcast with others so that they can join in as well. And we'd really appreciate it if you guys would share some questions as we go. If you have any questions for Ken. Today, we're going to do something kind of special. We're going to have an interview with Ken. I know you may remember about 3 months ago, some of you may have seen, we did an interview with Chuck as an opportunity to get to know a little bit of Chuck's background. Chuck did a lot of interesting things long before we became partners and opened a winery. So this will be our chance to get to know Ken a little bit. Ken has quite a storied background, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. I know lots of it from the many hours I've spent with Ken over the years, but I think it's time that all of you have a chance to get to know him a little better as well. So we got, let's see, we got 10 people online, and it's 4:04. So I think we probably should get started. We got Chelsea. Hi, Chelsea. Thanks for joining us.
Right.
All right. So I wanted to first start out by a brief introduction to a little bit of background for Ken. As you know, Ken and I and Chuck have been close friends for a long time, better than 20 years, and the three of us founded Hermit Woods Winery together back in 2010. And so Ken actually, before that, spent 25 years as a geologist, and he continues to work in that area as well, and we'll learn more about that. Before that, he actually he was born in Massachusetts, interestingly enough, but he grew up in California.
Yankee blood. That's right, Yankee blood.
Yeah, so he grew up in California, spent most of his childhood there, and then ended up back east because of school, and ended up here in the Lakes region for a job that had him working in his career, and that's where he worked for I think 25 or 26 years. So that's just a brief outline of a little bit about who Ken is, and so I want to stop talking and bring Ken into the conversation. So Ken, why don't you take over here? Talk a little bit about your early years. I'd be interested to know, in all the time we've spent together, I really feel like your family has always had a really big influence on you, especially your dad, and to help people understand a little bit about how you ended up in Massachusetts and then growing up in California. Why don't you start there?
Sure. Yeah, that was completely based on my dad, both my parents, of course, but my dad was originally from California and became a professor in chemistry. And he was finished up his doctoral degree at University of Southern California, at USC. Met my mom there. And then he got a postdoc position at Tufts University, just outside of Boston. And they moved there in 1961, I think it was. And lo and behold, I was born in 62, right there. And then a year later, my sister was born, also in Massachusetts. And then my dad had finished his postdoc in chemistry there and got a tenure track teaching position at the Cal State Northridge University. So he moved to Northridge, to the San Fernando Valley, just north of Los Angeles, in 1964. And so I was 2 when we moved there, and grew up there. Went to high school there, did my undergraduate studies there in Eagle Rock, California, at Occidental College. I thought I was going to go into physics, actually. I've always liked science. My dad always had science conversations. Everything was chemistry according to him. And so I went into college thinking that I was going to go into astronomy or something like that. And the Oxy's got a really close connection with Caltech, so it's pretty high-powered academics. And I didn't survive the hardcore calculus and physics in my freshman year. And they do that on purpose to weed out those people that aren't possibly ever going to, site and launch a rocket and land people on the moon or something like that. So that's a good thing that I shouldn't be doing that. So
you aren't a rocket scientist after all.
Right, exactly. So I wallowed around for a year or so and listened to a lot of Neil Young to figure out which way I was going to go in my life. And I ended up taking a Geology 101 class, and that was it. Light came on. I'm like, oh my goodness, you can study the Earth, integrate biology and physics and chemistry and age and time, and it's a big puzzle. The Earth is a big puzzle. You find the resulting evidence of what happened and you piece backwards. It's an inverse problem. You're looking at the result and you try to figure out how it got there. So I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. So I went through school there, had a great time. Very small department, three professors, probably 12 people graduate in the geology department each year. So you get to know one another really well, and you do a lot of camping and outside field camps and things, drink quite a bit of beer. Part of the geologic form, I think.
So, excuse me, was this at Occidental still, or have you moved?
That was at Oxy. Yeah, it was at Occidental
good.
College.
Good.
Yep. It was great. I started college when I was 17, and with my college ID that didn't have my birth date on it, I could call up a local liquor store and they would deliver beer, a case of Lowenbrau, to the campus. That was great. So you're living on campus and a free supply or an endless supply of alcohol, and really had a great time. I ended up moving back east for graduate studies, and East was sort of a choice because the woman I was dating at the time was an English major, and she got a job with a publishing house in New York City.
But before you get there, I think there's some interesting things that I'd like to have you talk about before you get to New York City, because
Sure.
I remember some great stories when you were either in high school or at Occidental when you were working to put yourself through school, that you worked for a company that manufactured gold mining equipment.
That's right. I got that job. I can't remember if it was in high school or in college, but it's the largest gold mining equipment, small scale gold mining equipment, gold pans, sluice boxes, small dredges, dry sluice boxes, and it's called Keene Engineering. And I guess Jerry Keene, the owner of the company, was part of the tennis club where my parents played tennis. And I was looking for a job. Yeah, I was 15, so I was in high school. I didn't have a car yet. And I applied for this job. And one of the questions on the interview was, how would I get there? And I wrote, well, I'd get a ride from my parents, or I'd take the bus, or I'd ride my bicycle, or I would walk if I had to. And Jerry Keene pulled me in after I had that application. He said, well, I knew you were going to get to work, so I was going to hire you. That's it. I didn't really think about it. It was the first time I applied for a job. And anyway, I liked that a lot. And that did fit right in well with the geology, of course. I don't know if the interest in gold mining sort of sparked my interest in geology. I never really thought about that, but it did happen before. I used to go up, well, you lived in that area, Bob, in Placerita Canyon.
Oh yeah.
Up there gold panning with my friend Joey, and we'd find little flecks of gold. It was a lot of fun.
I actually did that once.
Did you?
Once or twice, yeah. Just for fun, kicks and giggles, we took some pens because there were rumors about gold coming down those rivers out of the canyons.
Yeah, I still have in a little flask the very first gold nugget that I found. I can save some things. I don't have a good way of saving wine in my cellar, but there are some things that I save.
I don't know, your cellar looks pretty good there. It's a lot of nice looking wines behind you.
Well, yeah, well, you said this is the, Monday interview in the cellar. So I thought I'd be sitting in my cellar while we're talking.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So
That's
go ahead.
That's a batch of wine I made before I knew you guys. You don't even know about it. You've never seen those bottles before.
Maybe I
So
have.
back to gold mining, you actually, before we get back to gold mining, what are you drinking?
Well, it's I took it out of my cellar, and there's no label on the bottle, but I'm fairly certain it's the knot mead that we made back in 2015.
Excellent. And Chuck, I see you have something there. What are you sipping on?
I got in my car and drove down to the state liquor store to find a Hermit Woods mead, and what I found there was 3 Honey wine.
At the 3 Honey Gold, right?
No, actually, that's not. Where did I? Oh no, I got this at the Samerton Country Store. That's where I got it. They have the 3 Honey. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it wasn't
the
liquor
state,
store.
the
Sorry,
state liquor store.
Samerton General Store, Route 127, Samerton.
Actually, I stopped at the Samerton Country Store on my way to your place the other day, and I was really impressed with the wide selection of wines that they have of Hermit Woods. So if you're in the Samerton area, you can get a wide collection of our wines over there. So I'm drinking a bottle of 2014 cider. It's been sitting in my cellar waiting to be consumed for 7 years.
I'm really disappointed I'm not there, Bob. I'd really like to try that. That's an old cider.
And it's beautiful. It's still fruity. It's got a nice effervescence. It's fresh. I can't believe it, for 7 years. And don't worry, you're going to try some. I have 6 more bottles in the cellar.
Is that bottle conditioned? Is there any sediment on the bottom of it?
I don't know. I haven't gotten there yet.
Because that's before we had a bright tank, and I think the only way we made, and that's before we made our first commercial cider.
So I bet it's bottle conditioned.
conditioned.
Yeah. So that's what we're drinking. Everybody, if you have any thoughts or you want to share what you're drinking out there in the world, please do. We'd love to know. And let's get back to gold mining, because the other story I wanted you to share was you talked about how one of the folks you were involved with in some way took you to Alaska on a gold mining adventure.
Oh boy, yeah, that was amazing. That while I was at Keen Engineering, they wanted to do a little promo video to sell some of their equipment, and there was an old guy that was a customer of theirs, and he would come in, lived in the area, lived in Pasadena, and he would buy equipment. And so we ended up making a video together. I was the young, know-nothing guy that wants to learn about mining, and Hubert, I called him Old Tex. He's just super charismatic, incredible hands to look at, a fascinating way of talking that would just keep you listening. He was the guy that was going to be in the creek running his dredge or panning, and he was going to come and help me. So we went and set up on in the San Bernardino Mountains there, and set up a little filming thing. And Hubert and I made this video. And then a couple months later, he said, Ken, I've always wanted to go up to Alaska. I got to go there before I kick the bucket. I'm going to go this summer. Would you be interested in going with me? I'll pay for everything, but you gotta drive us up there and go along and put on the dry suit and go down and run this dredge. And it was right after my graduation from college. So this was 1983, the summer of 1983. We drove to Alaska from Los Angeles in his Ford F-150 with a camper on the back of it, and went up through Canada and Whitehorse and all the way up to Fairbanks, and had just an incredible journey together, and we mined a couple different places. One of the most memorable ones that I know I've told you this story, Bob, we found a guy who had a small claim on a creek, and he agreed to let us work that claim for a week. He took us in his little dinghy upriver, a couple of miles, to this little patch on the side of the river. And so this is my claim from that tree up there to that rock down over there. I'll see you in a week. And we said, all right. So we set up, and we started using the dredge. We built a little lean-to to sleep. The mosquitoes were horrendous. So we were always burning something to try to keep them away. And after a couple of days, the water started coming up in the river. It hadn't been raining or anything that we could see, but maybe way up in the catchment, they must have had a tremendous amount of rainfall, because the river started rising. And we had nowhere to go. We were on the sandy slope down to the river, and then there was a steep meter-high ledge into thick, dark pine forest full of mosquitoes. So we're like, wow, we're going to be in trouble here. We put a little marker, and overnight it came up about 1.5 feet. So we said, well, we got to get out of here. So we built a little huck fin raft. We cut down some trees. We had the flotation units from the dredge that we had. So we had brought up a 5 horsepower motor and a couple of inner tubes and some big hoses and a sluice box. And so we jumbled that whole thing together and took a long stick, put on our wetsuits, and got in this raft and started floating downstream to try to get out of there. And it was a magical ride. It wasn't raining, but the river had come up. It was moving pretty fast. We saw moose, we saw eagles. We're floating down, and there was a section that we had to portage up through, lots of big boulders that we couldn't go up before. We had to drag this little dinghy up through it. We came around the corner in this raft, and the clouds finally open up, and it's a torrential downpour. We had fired up the motor as a way of getting some propulsion in the raft, and we ran out of gas, and we could hear this incredible roar around the corner. And we looked at each other like, uh-oh, that's where we had to portage off, and we're floating towards that, and we have no control whatsoever. The river now is so deep that the long pole that we made to poke around with no longer works. Our motor has run out of gas, so we've got no way of pushing ourselves one way or the other. So we're headed over the edge, and we went over the edge. I was sitting on the front, trying to hold the front end up with the hose. We had taken this 5-inch diameter suction hose. It was 20 feet long, and used it as a big bumper and wrapped it with the back end sticking out. So it was an extra flotation as well. And we went over the front of this thing. I went completely submerged under the water, and we popped back up. Hubert was somehow still holding onto the back, grabbing onto the engine and anything that was there. And now we're caught in this eddy. We're caught behind this gigantic waterfall in this eddy, and it's pouring rain. And we're looking at each other like, we're out in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing anywhere. And so I jump off the boat and I start kicking like mad to try to get us over to the shore. And we eventually get to the shoreline. We pull a tarp over our heads, and we sit there looking at each other going, wow, we'll never forget this. Oh, I haven't thought about that in a while. That was an exciting time for sure.
That's cool. That's a great story. I'm glad you shared it. Did you find any gold?
We did find quite a bit. We didn't, lots of times when you're gold mining for placer deposits is based on the density. Gold is extremely dense. And so you winnow out large rocks and sand just sort of trumble on through the sluice box. But caught in the riffles is the real dense material, which is garnets, magnetite, and gold, hopefully. And so instead of taking the time to separate out the gold, we would just collect all of that heavy density material and throw it in a bucket. And so we brought that back with us. And Hubert in the end said we got about 1.5 ounces of gold. Back then, the value, he basically said it paid for the whole trip, what we found in gold.
Oh, that's cool.
That was fun. We broke even there.
Excellent. Let me take a break just to see who's joined us and any comments that anybody said. Hi, Eli. Eli's on with us today.
Hi, Eli.
And of course, Matt Dennett. He said earlier he's going to create quite a feast out of some of our goodies, some of our wines and some of his
comments.
Goodies.
It's
making me hungry. And oh, look at that! Nicholas is with us. Nicholas Kimberly. Nicholas is somebody. He's the winemaker from Mermaid Vineyard. Vineyard, yeah. And we're going to have Nicholas online with us in a few weeks and he's going to share some of his wine with us. So hi, Nicholas. Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to talking with you in a few weeks. And there's Marika. Marika's with us today.
Right.
Marika, as you all know, she works in the tasting room with us. Thanks for joining us. And Matt says melange and accessories.
That's good. You know, Bob, just reminiscing about the gold mining and that riffle box. Do you remember when you and Chuck and I rode motorcycles up to Todd Merrill's blueberry facility in Ellsworth, Maine?
Wow, that was a great trip.
He gave us a tour of the facility that his grandfather had created. And in that system, they needed, these wild blueberries grow a few inches off the stony soil in Maine. And people use these rakes to scoop up the berries. Well, they get unripe berries, they get twigs, they get flowers and leaves, and occasionally some gravel or whatever from the ground. And his grandfather had used a series of riffles. It looked just like a sluice box. When I remember going there, going, wow, you guys are using a sluice box to clean your blueberries. Todd looked at me like, what are you talking about? That's not a sluice box. My grandfather made that.
So that's a good connection to, it's nice. There's a lot of these connections and actually brings me to my next question, makes a nice connection. When you were also still out in California, you also had some interesting adventures on a bike. Chuck, as we all know, was almost an Olympian cyclist. And so he's got a background in biking and you ended up taking a pretty spectacular journey on a bike when you were pretty young. Tell us about that.
I've done a few of them. I've enjoyed being on two wheels since I was very young. And
with or without motors?
I was on two wheels going to the winery today too. I love riding bikes and it's really one of our key threads to our friendship because I know both of you are avid cyclists as well. In high school, I got turned on to traveling on a 10-speed. So I would do overnight trips out to the ocean or up to Vasquez Rocks. And also in high school, a friend of mine, we took a long trip up to Canada. No, let's see. No, it was just after I graduated from high school and before I started college. I was 17. It was the summer of '79. And we flew up to Edmonton, Canada, where my uncle lived, and then took a train to Jasper. Our bikes were still in boxes. We got off the train in Jasper in the Canadian Rockies there at about 10 o'clock at night. Still plenty of light out. So we assembled our bikes, put the handlebars back on and the pedals on and rode a short distance to a campground and set up our tents. And then for the next few weeks, we rode our bike down through the Canadian Rockies to Banff, to Lake Louise, down into Calgary, then sort of flat track down into Montana, went up over the Going to the Sun Highway in Montana and into Idaho. That trip ended on kind of a bad note. We had a bad situation where my friend actually got hit by a van. He was okay, but he slid on his back on the road for about 50 feet, and that didn't feel too good. So we ended up flying home. We were planning on riding all the way back to LA, but that trip got cut in half. The next summer, though, we took a one-way trip to Brussels, Belgium. And we spent about 2 months riding our bicycles around Europe. So the same guy, he got back on his bike after having that accident, and we went and we rode around Europe. That's where I fell in love with beer. That's when I learned what beer could be. Belgium is unbelievable. The quality and character of the beer. Of course, going into Germany and elsewhere, it was wonderful. We spent a little bit of time in France, but didn't partake of the wine at the time. I was 18. I was very much into beer and not wine. So I missed out the opportunity there to have some incredible wines, but had fantastic beers. That was a great trip. That's when Laker Airways was around. You remember that? Could fly expensively.
No. So that's interesting because many of you probably don't know this. Ken and I and Chuck have batted around the idea of someday having a triple bike built and riding
Got to do that
across the country on a triple. We've talked about it for, I don't know, 5 years now. And it's come and gone as a topic of interest. So it'll be interesting. I would love to do it. I think it's still.
I still think we should do that.
It's a great idea.
We'll fly out west and ride from west to east, so that we've got a tailwind more times than not.
Yeah.
When we were in Calgary, we met two young guys that had ridden from east to west. They left Montreal and made it to Calgary. And they said, especially in Saskatchewan, on the plains, the headwinds were just terrible. And as you know, riding a bike is mostly about overcoming wind resistance.
Yeah, so that's why a triple would be perfect, because it'd just be one person dealing with the wind and the other two would just be pure power behind them.
Right, and the other advantage to that is the two that are just pure power could be drinking
and not pedaling at all. That's a good.
Yeah, so the electric motor part of this bicycle.
Yeah, Chuck, how about that? We have whole bunch of big solar panels out there and an EV battery.
Electric motor.
Well, actually, this could fit in well. Brewmate, which is a product that we sell in the winery, just came out with a back tap. So the person in the front can wear the back tap, and then we can just tap the beer off the. That's a good idea.
Wow, the poor person that's carrying the booze doesn't get to partake unless someone
rotate. Okay, enough of that. Let's. So now we covered a little bit of your early years, high school, college, and we let everybody know you officially were a Valley boy, and
right.
So, and then
I still know how to ride a skateboard.
That's good. Yeah, there's a new skateboard park being built over in Meredith. You ought to check it out. It's pretty cool. So interestingly, we figured out that you were flying out to New York to go to school, to go to your graduate program. Probably the same year that I was driving out to LA, and we probably crossed each other somewhere in the middle of the country. I moved out there in 80, I guess it was 83, early 83.
It was 83 when I flew out to New York.
Yeah, so we crossed each other. We did not know each other at that point, and I was going out to go to school in LA, and you were coming here to go to school in New York. So you went on to your graduate program studying geology, and that took you on from New York not long after to Massachusetts. So tell us a little bit about that time. You talked about what brought you out here. You started to talk about your girlfriend at the time.
Right. My girlfriend at the time that I met in college was working for a publishing house in New York City. You know, that's the city to be in if you're in publishing, starting off, and that's where she wanted to go. And Queens College had a great program in geology, and they gave me a full boat ride out there to do my master's degree. So I showed up there and worked with a guy who did his research at Columbia University's geology think tank called Lamont Dougherty, and I actually dated some rocks. You can use isotopes within minerals to figure out how old those rocks are. So I dated some rocks from Zambia, Africa, and I didn't get to go to Africa at that time, but dated some rocks. And then I was looking to continue on studying geology. You know, this was a great gig to just go to school and study all the time. I loved it. And I got accepted into the doctoral program at UMass Amherst. So while I was there, I met the true love of my life. She was a major in geology, and many of the people who've been to Hermit Woods know Maya, my wife, and she interfaces with a lot of people with the winery through distribution, and she's been with us since day one, working in the tasting room and that sort of thing. I met Maya while I was at Queens College. She was getting her undergraduate degree, and we fell in love there and have been connected ever since. Just had our 33rd anniversary. And so we moved up to Amherst, Massachusetts, and lived there for 4 years while I was doing my graduate studies. She got her teaching credentials as a scientist and started teaching while we were there. We lived in a couple different places in the Happy Valley, north of Springfield and Holyoke, and Northampton. Amherst is a wonderful agricultural, cultural area, a lot of great things going on, great schools. And while I was there in graduate studies, I hooked up with a professor, and we embarked on a massive study of the New England Appalachian Mountains. And we studied the deformation of the rocks from the Adirondacks all the way to the coast of New Hampshire and Maine. And I was one other graduate student and our advisor. We did 3 parallel transects across the Appalachian Mountains. Mine was in the middle, and mine came right through the lakes region of New Hampshire. So I was studying rocks in this area, and there was a consulting company, an exploration geologic company called BCI Genetics, right by the Laconia airport. And I hooked up with a guy there, and we compared notes. We published some papers together on the lakes region. And when I was looking for a job coming out of college, I got a position at BCI Genetics in Laconia. So Maya and I moved to Laconia in 1989, the fall of '89.
That's interesting. So that was just a couple of years before my return to the East. Gerald and I moved back here in '93. So interesting.
Yeah.
Tracking back and forth.
So, you know, it was interesting because I haven't thought about this whole history and sequence of events, but it was just 1 year later that I fell in love with fermentation, when I discovered fermentation as something that someone could do. So it was 1990, the holiday season, the late part of 1990. My mom was looking for a gift for my brother. My brother was living in Cleveland at the time. And I said, well, you know, this whole home brewing thing is kind of interesting. Why don't you get Jeff a homebrew kit? So my mom bought an introductory kit for brewing beer at home. Charlie Papazan had helped with the legalities, and the Carter administration had made it legal for the first time in this country to brew beer and make wine at home. This was in the mid-'70s or something like that. Really started the whole revolution of craft beverages, if you will, in this country. So in 1990, my mom got my brother a home brewing kit, got my dad a home brewing kit, and she got me a home brewing kit. And we all, my siblings and I and our families, go out to California to celebrate. And I took Charlie Papazan's little book on home brewing, and I read that book cover to cover and then started over again. And I couldn't wait to come back and start making beer, and just never lost that love. I could still remember the flavor of those Belgian ales that I had, and have been on that path of enjoying creating distinctive quality products since then.
Didn't you tell me recently, and I didn't know this until just the other day when you mentioned it, that you actually, the first time you fermented was not beer, it was mead.
No, first was beer.
It was beer. Okay.
First was beer. And then in Charlie's book, there's a bunch of recipes, and one of those recipes it's like Rocky Raccoon beer or something like that. You blend in honey as part of the format, along with the malted barley. And I made that and enjoyed that. And he also had a couple of recipes for mead. I had no idea what mead was, not a clue. And he writes in such a great way that you're just compelled to make it. So I made my first mead in '94, I think, or something like that. And fortunately it's carried on ever since, and I keep getting to ferment stuff, which is great. It's really a fun path. So it started, I was thinking about today, since we're in 2021 now, that it started 30 years ago. I started brewing beer 30 years ago.
I can't believe how time flies.
It's amazing. More than half my life I've spent making alcoholic beverages.
So before we get further down that path, just tell us a little bit. So you started your first career in geology at this BCI company in Laconia, and you didn't stay there long, and then you ended up moving on to a different company. Tell us a little bit.
Yeah. Like any tracks, it's not uncommon to switch things around. And I had gone to work with this group at BCI because they had some really great scientists in their mix, and they were doing exceptional exploration. They had a vision for developing potable, renewable potable water sources in all sorts of different geologic settings. And I had studied cracks in rocks and movement of fluids in rocks academically. So this was an easy segue to move into looking for how groundwater moves through rocks below our feet. So BCI was a great group of people. I showed up in the fall of '89. Maya was pregnant with our first child, Max, who was born the next year. And a few months after I got there, the whole place fell apart. I tried not to take it personally, but they had some big brewing movings around that were happening between presidents and vice presidents and CEOs and CFOs, and they had gone public a short time before, and they had a couple of people there who were very instrumental in making that company as successful as it was. And they were planning on spinning off a new company. And there are actually two new companies that came out of the broken BCI. One was called Emery and Garret Groundwater, and one was called Hydrosource. Hydrosource was in Ashland, New Hampshire, and Emery and Garret was in Meredith, New Hampshire. And I went with Emery and Garret, and it was an incredible opportunity, small scale now. I'm one of 3 people that are making this company happen. And we took off and expanded and grew to be one of the leading groundwater exploration companies on the Eastern Seaboard. And I got the opportunity to help develop the methodologies for analyzing data, for storing data, for doing the exploration, for drilling the wells, making sure the resources were utilized properly. I got to map rocks from Georgia through Maine, out through West Virginia and out onto the plateau, seen all sorts of of rocks and different settings is just fantastic. Really an incredible opportunity. We started in a little garage just up the road here on Waukesha Road, and it was just a box of a building, but the rent was really cheap. We weren't sure if the company was going to make it at all. But then we moved right downtown Meredith in, I think it was 96. We bought that building, was a bank, 56 Main Street. So
it's 2 doors down from where we are today.
2 doors down, yeah. Well, part of that's on purpose in many regards. When, you know, when the activities, like any long-term relationship or business relationship, a number of people within the company had inklings and interests that were not aligned with others who were there. And so I was really looking to expand, to take what we'd learned on the Eastern Seaboard and expand that in a more global fashion. And that didn't really align with the president of the company and others there. So I sort of tapered back on the exploration geology and increased the activity and effort that went into this new little winery that had started growing starting in 2010. And that was and is so exciting to help shape that and grow something. I love being in a smaller group where each of our efforts really comes to the table full bore. It's not, I could never imagine working in a company of 500 people or 50 people, let alone. I mean, I much prefer 5 people or 15 people, a smaller group. You really, each and every person helps shape that institution completely. And I really like that. It really makes you focus on what you're doing. Make sure you're on your game every step of the way. Sure
does. So it's really interesting as we've been talking and exploring different aspects of your life back to your earlier days in California, all of the connections between the bicycling and fermentation and your interests, and how all of those sort of cross with so much of what's relevant in our experience today as friends, as partners, as a business. It's really interesting. I think that you can see some of that same track if you know, as we talked to Chuck about this a few months ago, we saw some of those same kinds of things bring to fore earlier interests in our lives, and as they coalesce into what we've created here at Hermit Woods. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I think we have that as part of our operating system. You and Chuck and I, each of us, if we find a situation that is enjoyable and interesting, we pursue it. And if we are in a situation that's not quite right or doesn't have a long run format, we try to move out of that, move towards those things. All along, I think all of us have really just gravitated towards and always keep our minds open to new opportunities, new possibilities.
Yes. So step back a little bit. Before the winery got started, you were still full-time into geology, and we met over beer, actually, and hard to believe, and mountain biking.
Hard to believe that we're not all drinking beer. You know?
I know. It could have easily gone that way, I think.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of interesting. Always kind of fascinated by the fact that it didn't. That we ended up going down the wine path, but and I'm glad we did. But who knows? There's still time left. We got that many years to think about our future. So anyway, during this time, we got to know each other, you and I, initially over beer and then mountain biking. And shortly after that, Chuck came into our lives. Mainly, I think the first time I met Chuck was on a mountain bike ride. I think that's right, in Center Harbor, right, Chuck?
Yeah. It might have been, at least in my memory, which is certainly faulty about this. I think we were like a Tuesday night or Thursday night group, and we went and rode up Gunstock, up one of the ski slopes.
Oh
I think
yeah.
that's the first time I remember meeting. I met Ken through South Bonnie School, but I
Right.
think that's the first time I met you, Bob. And then
Yeah.
later we went to the next ride was at your house or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. All kind of blurry. Well, that was 20 years ago. So I don't know. But
Cells are really, really probably lost at this point.
so Ken, we've talked, you and I and Chuck, over the last 6 months or so, we've talked on this forum about some of our experiences together doing these things, making beer and mountain biking. And I'd just be interested you to shed a little light on your experience, how you were reflecting on that on your own, you know, as you're getting to know us and diving deeper and deeper into this new world that has ultimately overtaken your geology in some way. You went from being a full-time geologist to being a part-time geologist and a full-time winemaker in the
Right.
period of about 5 years. So maybe you just shed a little light on what that experience was like for you personally.
Oh, that's a good question. It was a very sort of risky, gutsy, scary thing to do. At the peak of my scientific geologic career, 30 years under my belt, my degree, I'd spent all this time doing all this stuff, and to taper that off into something of the unknown, that I've got this great passion to try to craft interesting fermented beverages from what grows around here. And two friends, my deepest best friends, we're all aligned on this same thing and having an incredible time together. And there were other things that were happening at the same time. My son was graduating from college and my daughter was in college, and they were, you know, trying to figure out how to go through life and how to pursue those things that really matter, that other things will fall into place. And so I had to balance the fiscal responsibility to my family with the personal drive to pursue craft winemaking with my friends. So it was a really difficult, careful balance to make that all work, to try to figure out the timing. And when I did finally fully retire from my job as a geologist, working for Emery Garret, that was a really scary time. It was a strange place to be. Fortunately, I've been able to maintain my interest in geology independently. So I do get to look at the world and study different places and help people figure out where these natural resources are. At the same time, I've been able to maintain fiscal stability for my family, which was critical, and to pursue and dig in deeper and deeper and deeper on making craft beverages. So it all has worked out, but it hasn't been without a lot of fear of the unknown, of not knowing what's next, but having the confidence in making the choices. This is the right choice. I need to do this. I need to create this stuff. and I got, you know, two friends that can put up with my concerns and worries when I think I've ruined a batch or messed something up. And we've kept it alive that way through all of the challenge of growing a truly unique business. And nobody else is totally dedicated to making fruit wine and meads and cider the way we do, that I know of. If we're all in, and it's a strange business model because it's so much easier to stick with making Cabernet or Merlot or Chardonnay or sweet fruity wine that's less expensive. Those are a given. That's an easier path. Still, you can take that on and challenge it and make superlative versions of that Cabernet. But that's a crowded field. That's like, here again, if I can draw the parallel, that's like working in a company with 500 people or 5 million people making Cabernet. But my interest is in those groups of 5 people or 15 people. And in making these dry meads, these distinctive, unique fruit wines, we're in a group of 5 or 15. And that's what keeps the passion alive, I think. I'd never thought about it that way before, but it really connects to my deeper operating system. It is what I am most happy doing.
Well, I think this calls for some of my new toys. I can't agree more.
It's really quite amazing. I hadn't thought about that before either. It's really good.
I find this really helpful for me, and we've discovered all along the importance of the 3 of us staying closely in touch with each other, and keeping our communication open, and the more we learn about each other, and the more we understand each other, and the more we understand the things that drive us and the paths that brought us to the place that we are today, the easier it gets to be together, to solve problems together, to drive our business forward in a way that's meaningful and supportive to all of us.
Yeah, and we learn so much about ourselves.
Right.
So much about myself talking to you guys all the time.
Yeah, that's great. So we only got about 10 minutes, not even 10 minutes. So I want to hit a couple things quick. First, your favorite wine. You've been making wine at Hermit Woods now for 10 years. Do you have one you could just call out and say, this is it? This is the one that I've just loved the most. And I think I already know the answer, but I'll see what you say.
Is this wine that I make?
Yes. Your favorite wine that you make, that you've been developing a whole bunch of different wines over the last 10 years. Is there one that really just stands out and you go, wow, I'm so excited about this one wine and the direction this wine is going in?
Well, that would have been easier until we had that 2012 Petit Bleu the other day. I do really love the character and aroma and flavor and engagement of Red Scare, of that blend, of that wine. But I haven't yet, in my opinion, made a Red Scare as well as that 2012 Petit Bleu has been. I have a couple in the works right now that may get there, and I'm really excited. This particular harvest we spoke about on the previous event, the blueberries this last season were superlative, outstanding, and trying to make as much wine as possible with those, because I think those are all going to be outstanding vintages. And the way that Red Scare is being crafted with the 2020 blueberries is in a whole new way that's never been crafted before. So I'm really looking forward to that in 10 years, in 2030 or so, when we crack a bottle of the 2020 Red Scare. And then I'll answer that question.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when you're talking about a 2012 blueberry wine. I can't wait to taste the 2019 or 2017 Red Scare in 2030 or 2025. So I think it's every bit going to be as good as that blueberry wine we opened the other day, and then some. So it takes time. We always talk about the fact the only thing you don't have control over is time. You can nurse your wines into being those special things that they are, using all the techniques and skills that you have, but you cannot make time. You have to wait for it. And so it'll be 10 years before we know for sure what today's wine is going to really be like.
Yeah, and the part of that is, I'm a geologist shooting from the hip, making wine. I know what good wine tastes like. And I'm trying to figure out how to craft a wine that's going to end up tasting as a good wine. But a lot of the best tasting wines take time to get there. And I'm starting to understand that, because when you pack a whole bunch of stuff into the ferment, when you start that off, you put something into motion that takes 5 or 10 years
Right.
together. And there's no way to speed that up.
That's right. A couple things. Nicholas asked what the new process is. Nicholas, this would take a whole nother hour, I think, of our
New process
to get into that.
There are lots of new processes.
Yeah, we'll get into that when we get with you again in a couple weeks, Nicholas. And Matt talks about the problem of his self-control. Laying those wines down in the cellar. It's really hard to leave them there.
So Matt, on that regard, I'm terrible at that too, but Bob's not. So you have a friend that's really good at storing wine, and fill them up with wine, help them, support them, and then go and share some of their wine with them.
So quick, we're winding up here. So real quick, so do you have an all-time favorite wine, just random in the world, anybody's, or a region or place, or tell us what wine just gets you the most excited?
There's probably a tie. I really love a well-built, well-aged Chateauneuf de Pape. That Provence blend of Syrah and Mourvedre, it's just a wonderful wine. I love the balance and finesse of it. And the other is Burgundy from Burgundy, France. That was my first true love affair, was a 62 Clos de Vougeot that just rocked my world. And I'll never recover from that. So those are the two that really are my go-tos and interests.
I look forward to the day when the three of us get to have a comparable wine to your 62 Clos de Vougeot.
Clos de Vougeot, yes.
Yeah, that's always, actually, I've thought about that a lot over the years, that someday the three of us are going to crack open an amazing bottle of 40-year-old French wine. I look forward to it. So I ask this of everybody. You've always found this question kind of interesting. I'm going to ask it of you anyway, see what you come up with. But have you figured out what you want to be when you grow up?
I did think about this question, because I know you've asked it before and thought about it. And I pretty much figured it out when I was 17, I think. And I've been pursuing that ever since. That it isn't a growing up. It's not like you reach someplace. It is the process. And so when you figure out, for me, my freshman year in college, things came together and I was like, okay, I've got this figured out. I know how to pick and choose and make my way. And if all things go well, it's going to be a fruitful, enjoyable, rewarding path. So that's how I would answer that question.
Good. That's a good answer. Chuck, do you have a question that we didn't get to that you think you'd like to hear from Ken?
No, I thought that was a really good conversation. I think you've covered a lot of territory, and I'm fading out here. I mean, I'm losing all of my light, so I'm getting closer. And I'm almost
you've gone from that godlike figure with sun rays were against you to this.
So what time were you coming over for dinner tonight? Is my question.
Yes, I'm going to finish this glass of wine and head on over, Chuck. So you can ask me all sorts of questions in private.
I will continue with the questioning then. I'll turn some lights on too.
Yeah, that's good.
So Ken, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to share about your past or anything related to this conversation that you want to leave us with?
I guess the thing that especially as we're putting this out there to people who are interested in Hermit Woods, I just want to say thanks to everybody who's paying attention to what we're doing, that comes into the winery, that enjoys what we're doing, because we really like what we're doing, but it's not, it would still be in the basement at 5-gallon scale without everybody who's out there supporting us and enthusiastically coming through the winery and enjoying what we have to offer. that's how we get to keep doing it. And thank you, because I get to keep fermenting stuff. So that's how I like to leave it.
Excellent. That's a great way to leave it. So I'm just going to say a few words. Thank you, Ken, for spending some time talking about your
My pleasure.
past. And we will continue that conversation in future Mondays as we spend more time in the cellar with you every Monday at 4. I just wanted to say a couple things to everybody about our situation. We, as you know, or probably know, have probably heard, we have closed the winery for a couple of weeks. Unfortunately, we had an employee who was diagnosed with COVID, and thankfully that employee has had very minor conditions and is actually on the mend. Is feeling much better. So they're going to be just fine. And thankfully, we found out that all of us at Hermit Woods, the entire team, has tested negative for COVID. So it really speaks well of our team's efforts to try and protect us as a team and you, the public, with what we're doing. Our employee was on site with us for 2 days, working side by side with all of us while she had COVID, and thankfully nobody else got it. So we're doing something right. We're really pleased about that. But in the abundance of caution, we've decided to continue to be closed for a proper quarantine time of 10 to 14 days, and to allow us to clean the winery and to make sure that nobody expresses any symptoms. Tests aren't 100% positive. So we're just being abundantly cautious and look forward to getting the winery open end of January, early February, and seeing you all in the winery again. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for your support. So many of you have said such kind things to us on Facebook and other places about your support of our difficult situation and our staff's situation. So we really, really do appreciate that. We're looking forward to this whole thing being over and on the other side of it, and get back to some normal, something normal again. So thank you. And in the meantime, I'm happy to do curbside pickup. So anytime, if anybody wants to purchase some wine from us, no problem. Just give a call over to the winery, and we'll call you right back and schedule an appointment to come pick up some wines. And of course, you can get our wines at the liquor store throughout New Hampshire. And Maya, Ken's wife, has done a great job adding to the number of stores and locations around the area that you can buy our wine. So check with us if you're not sure. There may be some other locations other than the liquor store, and some of those locations may actually have some of the wines that the liquor store doesn't. Like the Sandbridge Country Store has a whole bunch of different wines, have all of our new canned products. So you support us when you buy wine from the Sandbridge Country Store and from the liquor store. So we really appreciate that. Again, thank you, everybody. I'm going to finish out the interview here, and we're going to look forward to seeing you all on Monday next week, 4 o'clock, in the cellar with Ken Hardcastle. And I'm going to leave it as a surprise what we're going to talk about, only because I don't even know. So, we'll see you on Monday next week. Thanks for joining us. Take care, all.